His truck died on a dirt road, and though 3 cars drove past, the only person to stop was the woman he had ruined 10 years ago, who still did not know the man in the mud was him. The engine coughed 3 times before going silent. Alexander Foster turned the key again. Nothing. His SUV, the most expensive model available in the country, which he had personally selected because the salesman promised it could handle any terrain, now sat crookedly in the middle of a dirt track, its front wheel buried in a rut of dry mud that the sun had turned into stone. Outside, the heat shimmered off the ground. Alexander stepped out of the vehicle with the calm of a man who had never lost control of anything. He looked at the hood, opened it, and saw wires, hoses, and a cluster of parts that cost more than the homes of anyone living in this valley. He realized with a strange twinge in his stomach that he had no idea what to do with any of them. He pulled out his phone. 1 bar flickered and then vanished. "Perfect," he muttered. He looked up, and the road climbed between green hills, curving without a post, a sign, or a shadow. In the distance, perched on the hillside, stood a handful of mud houses with broken tile roofs. Selden Valley was the name written on the folder resting on the passenger seat, the folder he had brought from the capital, which no one else was allowed to touch. Alexander loosened his tie, the first gesture of surrender in his adult life, and then he heard an engine. He turned and saw an old truck climbing the road, dragging a cloud of dust behind it. Alexander raised his hand, took a step toward the center of the road, and smiled that smile that opened doors in boardrooms, closed contracts, and made powerful men lower their gaze. The truck passed right by. It did not brake. It did not slow down. The driver glanced at him for a second, just 1 second, and continued as if Alexander were nothing more than a fence post. "Hey!" Alexander shouted. "Hey! Wait!" The dust filled his mouth. He stood there coughing, hand still raised, and something shifted inside him. It was not anger. He knew anger well. It was a tool he had used his entire life. This was something else. It was the absolutely new sensation that the world could continue turning without him. A second vehicle passed, a cart pulled by a skinny horse loaded with firewood. The man driving it actually looked at him, scanning him from head to toe slowly, with an expression Alexander could not interpret, and then clicked his tongue, and the horse kept walking. "I will pay you," Alexander shouted. "I will pay you whatever you want." The man did not turn his head. The third was a motorcycle. He did not even have time to raise his arm. Alexander sat on the running board of his truck, elbows on his knees, and for the first time in many years felt the sun directly on the nape of his neck, without air conditioning, without a roof, and without anyone to solve his problems for him. He looked at his watch, a useless habit. There was no one to be late for, because no one knew he was there. That had been the plan. No one was to know. He took the folder from the seat and pressed it against his chest as if the paper could protect him from the sun. It was then that the boy appeared, walking along the edge of the road, barefoot, carrying a bucket of water with both hands, bent by the weight, taking short steps so as not to spill a drop. He stopped a few meters away and watched him with that absolute frankness only children have, the kind that does not feign politeness or hide curiosity. "Did it break?" he asked. "It broke," Alexander admitted. The boy set the bucket on the ground carefully and approached. He circled the truck and crouched by the buried wheel, putting his hand on the hardened mud. "It is stuck," he declared. "It needs a board and water to soften it." Alexander blinked. How do you know that? Someone gets stuck here all the time, the boy said, shrugging his shoulders. In the rainy season, it happens every day. He straightened up, wiped his hands on his clothes, and looked at Alexander with tremendous seriousness. I will help you, but I have to deliver the water first, because if I am late, my mother gets worried. And he smiled. Alexander did not know why, but that smile tightened his chest. What is your name? Thomas, said the boy. And you? Alexander opened his mouth, and an instinct he could not name stopped him. Alexander, he said. Just that, the name without the surname, without the two surnames that in the capital were pronounced with respect, and in some places with fear. Very nice to meet you, Don Alexander. The boy held out his hand, a small hand, dirty with mud. Alexander shook it and felt the calluses on a hand of that size. Thomas! The voice came from up the road, sharp and urgent. The boy stiffened instantly. A woman was coming down the hillside, almost running, with a bundle of clothes in her arm. She reached them, took the boy by the shoulder, and put him behind her, with a movement so fast and so practiced that Alexander understood it was not the first time she had done it. Then she looked at him, and for the first time in his life, Alexander encountered a gaze that was not afraid of him, did not respect him, and felt absolutely nothing for him. Good afternoon, he said, recovering his reflex for courtesy. My vehicle broke down. Your son was kindly. We are leaving, she said. Ma'am, listen. We are leaving, she repeated, and started to climb. Wait, Alexander took a step. Please. And that word, please, came out of his mouth with a clumsiness that surprised him. He had said it thousands of times in his life, at dinners, meetings, and speeches, but he had never needed it. The woman stopped, though she did not turn around completely. Just enough. There is no repair shop, she said. There is no tow truck, no signal. The closest town with a mechanic is hours away, and the only truck that goes down has already passed. I saw 3 vehicles pass. Yes, she said. She saw them pass. And in those 4 words, there was something so sharp, so full of a history he did not know, that Alexander went silent. Look, he said, seeking familiar ground. I can pay. I will pay you. I will pay whoever. I will pay triple what it is worth. It was a mistake. He knew it the instant the words left his mouth. The woman turned completely. And with what do you think you buy a mechanic who does not exist? She asked without raising her voice. With what do you buy a tow truck that is not coming? I am alone. You are alone. You think everything has a price. She adjusted the bundle of clothes against her arm. Up here, we learned that we do not. And she kept climbing. Mom, Thomas tugged at her arm. Mom, he is going to get heat stroke. The sun is strong, and he has no shadow, no water, no anything. Thomas! But Mom, Doña Amparo says that whoever is left without water on the road must be given some, even if they are bad. She says that one does not ask about that. The woman closed her eyes. Alexander saw in that gesture something he would recognize much later, the exact moment a person fights their own heart and loses. Give him the bucket, she said, exhausted. Yes, the boy ran over. Just the bucket, Thomas. The boy lifted the bucket with both hands and offered it. Alexander hesitated. The water was not clean. It had earth suspended in it, swirling in small brown eddies. In his house in the city, that water would not have been fit even for watering plants. He took the bucket, drank, and in all his life, with the dinners, the toasts, the bottles that cost more than a family's entire monthly salary, Nothing had ever tasted like that. "Thank you," he said, and his voice broke in the middle of the word. The woman was watching him from up the road. Something changed minimally in her face. Not pity, but something else. Recognition of the most dangerous kind, the kind belonging to someone who suddenly sees a human being where before they only saw a suit. "Night will fall," she said at last, "and here night falls all at once, not like in the city." She paused. "In the village there is an old house where people passing through sometimes stay. Go up before it gets dark. Ask for Doña Amparo. She decides. And you cannot—" "No," she said, "I cannot." And something in the way she said "I cannot," not "I do not want to," stabbed Alexander between the ribs. "At least, tell me your name." She looked at him for a long moment. "Marisol," she said, and left. Alexander walked up the path with the folder under his arm, his shoes ruined and his tie in his pocket. The sun was setting. The shadows of the hills lengthened like hands. While he walked, he thought about what he carried in that folder. He thought about the documents, the signatures, the seal of the Bastos San Vidal Construction Company, and the project that was going to be built in that valley, and the 73 families who, according to the papers, had no legitimate right to the lands they had inhabited for generations. He thought about how he had come in person, alone, without a chauffeur or assistant, precisely so that no one would associate him with what was going to happen in Selden Valley. And he thought, with a new discomfort, about the taste of the water with earth. "It is business," he told himself. "Businesses have no heart. That is why they work." He repeated that phrase throughout the walk, like someone saying a prayer. When he arrived at the first houses, the whole village seemed to stop. A woman sweeping stopped sweeping. 2 men sitting on a bench stopped talking. Someone closed a window. No one greeted him, no one spoke to him, but he felt every gaze like a hand on his back. And he understood something that left him frozen. They were not looking at him with curiosity. They were looking at him with memory. Don Alexander. Thomas came running between the houses, breathless, with that impossible energy of children at the end of the day. "Yes, I arrived. I told my mom I was going to arrive. I arrived," said Alexander, and discovered he was smiling without intending to. The boy stopped in front of him and looked at him. He looked at him in a different way than on the road, with his head tilted, squinting like someone trying to solve something. "What is it?" Alexander asked. Thomas did not answer right away. "You look just like him," he said finally in a low voice. Alexander felt an absurd chill in the middle of that heat. "Just like what?" "Like the man in the portrait," said the boy. "The one my mom keeps hidden. The one she never lets me look at." The air stopped. "Thomas!" Alexander crouched slowly until he was at eye level. "What portrait?" And the boy, with the devastating naturalness of someone who does not know they are lighting a fuse, replied, "The one she has kept since they took my father." Alexander felt the ground moving beneath him. "Thomas," he said, and had to clear his throat. "Who took your father?" The boy opened his mouth to respond. "Thomas!" The voice came from the other end of the dirt street. It was not a scream. It was something worse. It was the tone of a mother who no longer has the strength to scream. Marisol was standing next to a clothesline with her hands still wet. "Mom, I just—" "Inside. My son. Inside." The boy lowered his head and obeyed, but before disappearing through the door, he turned slightly and looked at Alexander over his shoulder with a silent apology that hurt him more than the mother's gaze. Marisol stayed where she was. She did not approach. It was not necessary. "I told you to ask for Doña Amparo," she said. "I did not tell you to speak to my son." "Ma'am," he approached me. He approaches everyone. She took a garment from the clothesline and folded it against her chest with an almost violent precision. "That is my son's problem. He still believes people are good." And she entered the house. The door did not slam. It closed slowly, which is how doors close when the person on the other side no longer expects anything from you. Doña Amparo's house was the last in the row, with a covered porch, tin pots hanging from the beams, and a smell of herbs that brought back a memory so old Alexander did not even know where it came from. The old woman was sitting in a wicker chair, doing nothing. What do people do who have already done everything? She was not surprised to see him, not even a little. "You arrived late," she said, without greeting him. "The sun left you? You were waiting for me? I wait for everyone, my son. At this stage of life, those who do not arrive today arrive tomorrow." She pointed with her chin to a wooden bench. "Sit down before you fall." Alexander sat, and only then, upon stopping being upright, did he understand how exhausted he was. His legs were shaking, his shoulders were burned, and his feet were one single wound inside his shoes. Doña Amparo watched him for a long time in silence. "Marisol sent you?" "Yes." "Then she still has more heart than is good for her." She stood up with an effort that cost her 2 sighs and disappeared inside. She returned with a plate, bread, some cheese, and coffee in a pewter mug. Alexander looked at the food. It was literally the humblest thing he had been served in his adult life. "I have no way to pay for this." "No one asked you to pay for anything." The old woman returned to her chair. "Eat, and then tell me what a man like you came looking for in a place like this." He ate. He ate like he had not eaten in years, without speaking, without checking his phone, without negotiating anything. "While chewing, I came for a work matter," he said at last. "Aha. A land issue." The wicker chair creaked, and the entire porch, with its tin pots and smell of herbs, suddenly became a very dangerous place. "Land," repeated Doña Amparo, very slowly. "How curious. Here in this valley, when someone comes from the city to talk about land, the same thing always happens." "What happens? That someone loses theirs?" Alexander pressed the folder against his thigh. It was getting dark. Someone in a house lit a lamp, and the yellow light spilled onto the dirt street. "Doña Amparo," he said, choosing every word. "When I entered the village, the people looked at me in a way. It was not curiosity. It was as if they knew who I am. Don't they know who you are?" The old woman looked him straight in the eye. "They know what you are. I don't understand the difference. The difference is that one asks a person for their name. One closes the window on danger." Alexander looked down at the pewter mug. "There was something here," he said, "before I arrived. Something with a company." Doña Amparo did not answer. "Tell me what happened." "That is not for me to tell." "And whose job is it?" The old woman looked toward the end of the street, toward a small house with a clothesline outside. "The one who lost everything," she said. "And that woman hasn't spoken since that season. That woman hasn't spoken to anyone in this town, more than strictly necessary. She works, she raises her son, and she stays silent. And we all respect her here because when the whole town bowed its head, she was the only one who raised hers. She settled into the chair, and it cost her dearly." "What did it cost her?" "Everything, my son. It cost her everything." Alexander felt the chill again, that absurd chill in the middle of the heat. "The boy told me something," he murmured. "He told me that his mom keeps a portrait hidden, a portrait of a man. And he told me," he swallowed saliva, "he told me that I look just like that man." Doña Amparo closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, there was something in them that Alexander had not seen in his entire life. Pity that was not for him, but for what was about to happen to him. "Go to sleep," the old woman said, standing up. "Tomorrow the milk truck goes down at dawn. Get on it, don't look back, and never come back. Doña Amparo, I am doing you a favor. I need to know." The old woman stopped at the threshold. "No, my son," she said without turning around. "You don't need to know. You need to leave before you find out. It is not the same." And she went in. Alexander did not sleep. The room they gave him was small, very clean, with an iron bed and a window without glass. He lay face up, listening to the crickets, the distant dogs, the enormous silence of the field, that silence which does not exist in the city, and which here weighed like a blanket. And he thought about the folder, he thought about the 73 families, he thought about Marisol's voice saying, "You think everything has a price?" And about the taste of the water with earth, and about the calluses on the hand of a boy who still carried buckets barefoot. And he thought, above all, about the portrait. Before dawn, when the sky was barely beginning to pull away from the hills, Alexander got up and went out. He could not explain why. He walked toward that house. Later, much later, when he understood everything, he would say it was the only honest decision he had made in years. Marisol's house was silent, the clothes line empty. Alexander stopped in front of the door and raised his hand to knock, but he did not knock because he heard the coughing. It came from inside. It was a dry, short, insistent child's cough. Alexander remained with his hand in the air, listening as that cough repeated and repeated, and did not stop. And then he heard Marisol's voice, low, singing something, and the sound of a chair being dragged, and again the cough. He lowered his hand, sat on a stone on the other side of the road, and waited, without knowing what he was waiting for. The sun came out, and so did Thomas. The boy saw him, and his entire face lit up. He crossed running. "I knew you were going to come back," he whispered, looking back. "Mom just fell asleep. She was awake all night. Thomas, your cough is nothing." The boy made a gesture with his hand, an adult gesture, a gesture he had learned by copying someone who also said it was nothing. "It happens to me whenever it rains. It happens more." And then he approached with eyes shining with a secret. "I brought it," he said. Alexander felt his heart stop. "What did you bring?" Thomas put his hand under his clothes and took out a folded paper, folded and unfolded so many times that the creases were about to break, worn and soft like fabric. "The portrait," said the boy. "I took it out of the box. I will give it back to you before she wakes up, I swear. But I want to know." And his voice trembled. "I want to know if you are my father." The world stopped. "Thomas," Alexander knelt in the dirt. "I am not your father, but you look just like him. Thomas, listen to me. My mom never lets me see him. And now," yes, the boy's eyes filled. "Never. And everyone in the village goes quiet when I ask. And I know he exists because she keeps it. One does not keep people who do not exist." And he put the paper in Alexander's hand. Alexander unfolded it with fingers that did not respond. It was not a portrait. It was a page from a newspaper, yellowed, brittle, with the name of the newspaper still legible on the top edge, The Voice of the Valley. And in the center, a photograph. A man in a suit in a conference room, signing a document before flashes. A man who smiled with the absolute certainty of someone who had just closed the deal of his life. That man was him, Alexander Foster. Many years younger, many years cleaner, many years before learning the taste of water with earth. The headline read, Foster Construction distances itself from the Viewpoint tragedy. The company points to a foreman as the sole responsible party. And below, in smaller letters, a name that Alexander had signed, had filed, and had forgotten the very same day. Arthur Quintero. Arthur! The paper trembled in his hands. Is it him? Asked Thomas, with a hope that was unbearable to hear. That man in the photo. Is he my father? Is it you? Alexander could not speak. He could not. He had his throat closed, his chest full of stones, and in front of him a boy waiting for them to return his father. Thomas, he managed to say, that man in the photo is not your father. Then who is he? And behind them, the door opened. It is the man who took him from me. Alexander turned. Marisol was in the threshold. She was not crying. She was not screaming. She was standing there, very still, looking at him with a calm that was scarier than any fury. Thomas, she said without taking her eyes off him. Go inside the house, Mom. Go inside, my love. Please. The boy obeyed, and this time the door closed. The two of them were left alone on the dirt road, with the yellow paper between them and the sun rising over the hills. Alexander opened his mouth. I can explain. Mr. Foster, said Marisol, and his full name, said by that mouth in that place, sounded like a sentence. You! He swallowed. Do you know who I am? I knew as soon as you got out of the truck. Alexander felt the air leaving him. Since yesterday, from the first second. Marisol took a step and another until she was in front of him. I have had that face stored away since I was almost a girl. I looked at it every night for years. I looked at it so much that I know it better than my own. Then why? Alexander's voice broke. Yesterday, on the road, you could have left me there. You could have gone away. And that would be that. Yes, she said, I could. Because you gave me water. Marisol looked at him for a long time. Because my son was watching, she said. And because the day I taught Thomas to pass by a thirsty man, you would not have just taken his father from me, you would have taken my son, too. Alexander felt the tears rising, and he felt ashamed, a physical, burning shame, like a fever. Mrs. Quintero, no, she said, not yet. You have not yet earned the right to say my surname. She gently snatched the paper from his hands and folded it with infinite care. Now you are going to get on the milk truck, and you are going to leave this valley, and you are going to go back to your life, and you are going to do what you came to do with those papers you press against your chest, as if I didn't know exactly what they are. Alexander looked at the folder and felt it burning him. I did not come to... Yes, you came. Marisol turned around and walked toward her door. Everyone comes. Wait. And this time it was almost a scream. Your husband. Where is your husband? Marisol stopped, and when she spoke, she did not turn around. That is the worst thing about you, sir, she said, that you do not even remember what you did to him. Tell me. Marisol put her hand on the door. Arthur is alive, she said, and the ground opened up under Alexander's feet. He is alive, locked up, paying for something he did not do from the day you put your signature on that paper. Her voice finally broke, just a single crack. And my son thinks his father is in heaven, because I prefer that he believes that than to know his father is hours from here, waiting for someone to tell the truth. And she went in. The milk truck passed at dawn. Alexander heard it arrive, heard the screech of the brakes, the driver's voice shouting a greeting to someone, the dry thud of the cans against the platform. He heard how the engine roared again, how it pulled away, how the sound became tiny between the hills until it disappeared. He remained sitting on the edge of the iron bed, with the folder on his knees, not moving. Doña Amparo appeared in the threshold. He left, he said. Yes. He didn't leave. My son. You let him go. The old woman looked at him for a long time. That is not the same. Alexander did not answer because he had no answer. Because until that morning all the decisions of his life had had a motive, a calculation, a number at the end, and this one had none. Doña Amparo, he said, where does she work? The old woman sighed like someone watching someone walk straight toward the cliff. Everywhere, she replied. Marisol cleans at the Cherry Inn, which is the only place in the valley where people passing through stop, and she cleans at the little school, the almonds, after the children leave, and when there is a party, a wake, a baptism, she cleans that too. Alexander felt a pang. And before? What did she do before? Doña Amparo leaned on the doorframe. Before, that girl studied, she said. Before, she was going to be a teacher. She had notebooks and everything. She paused. Then your surname came out in the newspaper. And in a small valley, my son, a surname in the newspaper is a conviction that no judge signs. No one ever hired her again for anything other than a bucket and a rag. No one told her no to her face. There were simply no vacancies. Never again were there vacancies for a Quintero. Alexander closed his eyes. You wanted to know what it cost her, said the old woman. There you have it. It cost her being who she was going to be. The Cherry Inn had a stone courtyard and pots everywhere. Alexander stopped on the other side of the gate in the shadow of a tree and watched. Marisol was on her knees in the hallway, scrubbing the floor, not with a machine, with a brush and her hands. And he, who had built entire buildings, who had signed contracts that moved fortunes, stayed there watching as the woman he had ruined cleaned the floor where others walked. A guest came out of one of the rooms, passed by her, did not greet her, did not look at her. He passed over the freshly scrubbed floor, leaving the complete footprint of his shoes, and continued as if the hallway had cleaned itself, as if no one had been there on their knees. Marisol said nothing. She went back, scrubbed again without a gesture, without a sigh, without a complaint. And Alexander felt something he had never felt, the violent desire for someone to hit him. Because he knew that guest, not that man in particular. He knew the type. He had been that man his entire life. He had walked over 1,000 freshly cleaned floors without asking himself even once who had cleaned them, or at what time, or with what hands, or at what cost. He turned around and walked fast, without direction, with his throat closed. And that was how he arrived at the chapel. It was small, whitewashed, with a bell tower that stayed up more by habit than by structure. The priest was outside sweeping the entrance, an older man with slow movements. He looked up and was not surprised. In that village, apparently, no one was ever surprised. Father Ephraim, said Alexander, reading the name on a faded sign next to the door. And you are the man from the truck, replied the priest. The entire valley has known it since yesterday. The entire valley knows more than I do. That always happens. The father leaned the broom against the wall. The last one to find out is the one who did the thing. Alexander felt the blow. So you also know who I am? I know what signature you have, said the priest. That is the only thing this valley has known of you during all these years. A signature. He looked at him. It is curious, is it not? A man can destroy an entire village without ever having set foot in it. Alexander had to lean on the whitewashed wall. Father, he said, and his voice came out broken. I don't remember. What did you say? I don't remember having signed that paper. He passed his hand over his face. And I don't say it as an excuse. I swear. I say it because it is worse. Last night I spent hours trying to remember. And I cannot. That document that ruined that woman, that took her husband, that took the future from her son, for me, it does not exist. It is one sheet among hundreds. I signed it and forgot it the same day. The priest studied him in silence. And why did you forget? Alexander looked at the floor, and for the first time since he had gone up to that valley, he broke. Because in that season I was burying my wife, he said. The silence of the chapel became enormous. Valerie, he whispered. Her name was Valerie. She left from one day to the next, and I did not know how to be alive after that, so I did the only thing I knew how to do. Work. I told my partner to sign everything, to resolve everything, to bring me the papers, and I would put the name without reading, and he would put the words, and I would sign, 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 because while I signed, I did not have to feel anything. He looked up, and his eyes were watery. I was anesthetized, Father, and I did not realize that my anesthesia cost another family their entire life. Father Ephraim did not say, "It was not your fault." He did not say, "God forgives." He did not say any of the easy things. He said, "Then you already know what it is like for someone to be taken from you." Alexander was left breathless. "Yes, I do." The priest nodded slowly. Because whoever does not know what it feels like cannot repair anything. They can only pay, and paying is useless. He turned around. Come, there is something that belongs to you, to me, to you, since a very long time ago. The sacristy was a tiny room. The father opened a drawer, rummaged, and took out a yellow envelope sealed, with the edge eaten by humidity, and on the front, written by hand in a large, clumsy script, it said, "For the gentleman who signed." Alexander looked at the envelope and could not lift his hand. "Nicholas wrote it," said Father Ephraim. "Nicholas Quintero, Marisol's husband. He got it to me shortly after they took him, when he still believed someone was going to listen to him. And why did you never send it to me?" "Because I did not know where to send it," said the priest, and in his voice was an old shame. "I asked the company. I wrote to them 3 times. They never answered me. A lawyer returned a letter to me saying that the matter was closed. He put the envelope in his hand. And I kept it because a man asked for only one thing in his life, and that thing was for this to arrive. I kept this envelope waiting for someone who was never going to come." Alexander looked at the yellow paper trembling between his fingers. "And you came," finished the father. "Your truck broke down, and you came." "Father," Alexander swallowed, "does Marisol know this exists?" The priest looked away. "No." "Why?" "Because she stopped hoping a long time ago," he said. "And to people who have stopped hoping, you cannot just return hope like that. That also does harm." He took him by the arm with unexpected strength. "Listen to me well. If you open that envelope and then leave, if you read it and get on the truck and disappear, Then it is better that you burn it now, because that woman has already survived having her life broken once. She does not survive twice. Alexander pressed the envelope against his chest. I am not going to leave. That is what everyone says, Father. And he looked at him straight on. I am not going to leave. The priest let him go. Then read it where it belongs, he said. Back in the field of saints. That is where the rest of the story is. The Valley's cemetery was just a fenced plot behind the chapel, with wooden crosses and some stones. Alexander walked between the graves with the envelope in his hand, without knowing what he was looking for, and then he saw it. A simple concrete headstone, well kept, fresh flowers in a jar, the ground clean without a weed, as if someone went to sweep there every week, and the name engraved by hand with a finger when the cement was still wet. Arthur Quintero. Alexander stood frozen. He is alive, Marisol had said. He is alive, locked up, and yet there was his grave, with flowers, with the ground swept. No one is inside. Alexander turned suddenly. Thomas was standing a few meters away with his hands in his pockets, looking at the headstone with a calm that did not belong to anyone his age. Thomas, it is empty, said the boy. I know. Alexander felt his heart stop for the second time in 2 days. How do you know? Thomas shrugged. And that gesture, that tiny gesture of nothing, was the most devastating thing Alexander had ever seen. Because when I was little, I heard Doña Amparo talking to the father, he said. They thought I was asleep, and they said my mom had had the stone made so that I would have a place to talk to my father, so that I would not be the only boy in the village without any place. Alexander fell to his knees in the dirt. Thomas, listen to me. I come anyway, the boy continued, and now his voice became small. Every week I come, and I clean it, and I bring him flowers, and I talk to him. And when my mom asks me, I tell her that I prayed to heaven, and she gets happy. His eyes filled. And I let her be happy, because if she finds out that I know, she is going to get sad. And my mom is sad all the time, Don Alexander. All the time, even if she acts like she isn't. Alexander put his hands to his face. That boy had spent his whole life pretending to believe in a lie to protect his mother. And his mother had spent her whole life holding up that lie to protect her son. Both lying, each for love of the other, each carrying the same weight alone a meter apart without knowing it. Thomas, he said, and he no longer cared that the boy saw him crying. Come here. The boy approached, and for the first time he let himself be hugged, and Alexander felt it. The bones, the coughing contained in the chest, the trembling of a little one who had spent years doing the work of an adult. Don Alexander, whispered Thomas against his shoulder, you are from the city. You know things, right? Yes. Then, tell me the truth. He pulled away and looked him in the eyes. My father is not in heaven, right? The whole world stopped. Alexander looked at that boy, looked at the empty headstone, looked at the yellow envelope trembling in his hand, and knew that what he said in the next 3 seconds was going to define the rest of his life. No, he said, he is not in heaven. Thomas did not cry, he did not scream, he clenched his fists and breathed deeply like a man. I already knew, he said. And then, with a voice that broke Alexander into pieces, can you bring him? Alexander could not respond. He looked down at the envelope and, with clumsy fingers, with the boy watching him, with the sun setting on a grave with no one inside, he opened it. The writing was large, clumsy, from someone who had learned to write late and with effort. And the first line said, "Sir, I am not writing to ask you to get me out of here. I am writing to ask you for something that will cost you nothing, and that is costing me my life. You do not know me. I do not know you either. I never saw you. I only saw your name on a paper. And with that name, it was enough. I worked on the viewpoint. I was the one who checked the structures, and I warned. I wrote a report with my own hand because I do not know how to write beautifully, but I know how to look at a beam and know when it won't hold. I handed it over in person at the office in the city, and they gave me a receipt with a seal. I kept that paper like one keeps a child. That paper disappeared, sir, and without that paper, I am just a man who does not know how to write beautifully, saying that he warned. I am not asking you to believe me. I no longer ask for anything for myself. I ask you for only one thing. When my son grows up and asks who his father was, let someone tell him that his father was not a bad man, that his father warned, that his father shouted, and no one heard him. You have the power for that phrase to exist. I do not. That is all I ask. Arthur Quintero. Alexander stopped reading. He could not continue. He had the paper in his hands, and his hands were no longer his. "What does it say?" asked Thomas. Alexander looked at that boy standing next to an empty grave, and understood that he was living in real time exactly the moment that man had imagined in the letter. When my son grows up and asks, it was happening now, and the only one who could fulfill it was the same one who had signed the conviction. It says, Alexander's voice broke, it says that your father warned. Warned about what? That the building was going to fall. Thomas stayed very still. And they didn't listen to him? No. The boy processed that, and then, with tremendous clean logic, said, "Then my father did nothing wrong." "No, Thomas." Alexander passed his hand over his eyes. "Your father did the only good thing anyone did in that whole story. And why did they take him and not the others?" Alexander opened his mouth and did not find any answer that a child could bear. None that he himself could bear. "Because the others had lawyers," he said, "and he had a paper with a seal." "And where is the paper?" "I don't know." "And can it be searched for?" Alexander looked at the letter. "Yes," he said, and something inside him straightened for the first time in years. "Can it be searched for? Marisol is here." The voice of Doña Amparo arrived from the gate of the Field of Saints, and Marisol appeared running. She crossed the plot between the crosses, took her son by the arm, checked him from top to bottom with that desperation of a mother who has learned that the world takes people without warning. "Are you okay? Did he do anything to you?" "Mom, he didn't do anything to me," she repeated, and for the first time her whole body trembled. "Mom, he told me the truth." Marisol froze. Very slowly she straightened and looked at Alexander. What truth? It was not a question. It was the edge of an abyss. Alexander stood up. "Mrs. Quintero, what truth did you tell my son?" "Mom," Thomas took his hand with both of his. "Mom, I already knew." And there Marisol broke, not all at once, little by little. "What is worse?" She looked at her son, and looked at the headstone, and looked again at her son. And on her face one could see all the years of lies sustained by sheer force passing by, all the nights in which she had swallowed the truth so that that child would sleep peacefully. "Since when?" she whispered. "Since I was little?" "Since—" Her voice failed. "I was letting you be happy," said Thomas, and tears started to roll down. "Sorry, Mom. I was letting you be happy." Marisol fell to her knees and hugged him, and squeezed him, and buried her face in his shoulder. And finally, that woman who had not cried in front of anyone in all those years cried. Alexander turned around so as not to look. It seemed obscene to look. When she spoke again, her voice came from very far away. "Leave, Marisol. Leave here. You already broke the only thing I had left whole." He wrote a letter. Silence. Marisol raised her head. What did he say? Alexander approached and handed her the yellow paper. Arthur wrote this. He gave it to Father Ephraim so that he would get it to me. My company never answered. It was kept in the sacristy all this time. She looked at the envelope and did not take it. You are lying. Look at the handwriting and that phrase. Look at the handwriting. She did what nothing else had done. Marisol took the paper, unfolded it, and the instant her eyes fell on those large, clumsy strokes, that whole woman broke like a dam. First without noise, and then with everything. It is him, she said. It is his handwriting. It is him. She read with her hand over her mouth. She read standing up, and then sitting on the dirt, and then hugging the paper. And when she reached the end, when she reached the part where the man asked for nothing for himself, she kept staring into the void for a very long time. I thought he had surrendered, she whispered. All these years, I thought that at some point he got tired and stopped fighting. She raised her broken eyes. And he never fought for himself. He fought because my son would have a decent father in his memory. That is the only thing he asked for in his entire life. Alexander knelt in front of her in the dust. I am going to find that report. No, Marisol, no. And now she screamed. Don't do this to me. Do you know how many times people told me that? Do you know how many lawyers? How many journalists? How many people went up to this valley saying, I am going to help? Everyone went down, and every time someone went down, I had to rebuild myself from zero. She pressed the letter against her chest. I no longer have the material to rebuild myself again. I am empty, sir. I have no material left. Alexander looked at her and said the only true thing that occurred to him then. Don't believe me. She blinked. Don't believe me at all, he repeated. Don't hope. Don't have hope. Don't build anything. Continue your life the same. I did not come to ask you to trust me, because I do not deserve it, and you do not owe it to me. He stood up. I am only warning you what I am going to do, just like he warned. And he left. The milk truck passed at dawn. This time he took it. He went down from the valley, sitting on the platform between the empty cans, with the folder under his arm and his clothes ruined, watching how Selden Valley became tiny between the hills. In the town below, he got a signal, and with the signal came the world. Messages, missed calls, urgent emails, the entire machinery of his life turning on again all at once. He ignored everything. He dialed only one number. Where did you get to? The voice of Ishmael Vidal was warm, worried, perfect. I have been calling you for days. I need the viewpoint file. A very brief pause, almost imperceptible. Almost, what? You already heard me, Alexander. A soft laugh. That is ancient history. What for? We will see each other at the office. The crystal tower smelled of clean, of cold, of nothing. Alexander crossed the lobby, and people stepped aside, not out of respect, but because they did not recognize him. The owner of all that came with ruined shoes and a beard of days. Ishmael waited for him above. He stood up from the desk with open arms. "Brother, did you have the report?" "It existed," said Alexander. Ishmael lowered his arms. "What report?" "The one Arthur Quintero wrote. The one he handed over in this office in person with a stamped receipt before the structure gave way." "Alexander, sit down. Did it exist, or did it not exist?" Ishmael settled against the desk with a calm that to Alexander suddenly seemed monstrous. "Listen to me well," he said, and his voice was no longer warm. "You were destroyed. Your wife had just died. You couldn't even sign your own name without your hand shaking. I held this company alone while you fell to pieces. Did the report exist? A paper from a foreman without studies saying that he didn't like a beam?" said Ishmael. "And there were 300 employees, 12 open works, and banks that would have eaten you alive. I made a decision. You made a decision. I made the only possible decision. A man is locked up." "A man?" Ishmael repeated, and smiled. And that smile was the coldest thing in the whole building. And how many men would have lost their jobs if this had exploded? "And your daughter Renee, where would she have studied?" He straightened. "I saved your life, and you didn't even notice. And now you come back from God knows where smelling like the country to come talk to me about morals." Alexander looked at him and felt a deep nausea. "I want the file. It is closed. I am the owner of this company." "Yes," said Ishmael, "and you are also the man who signed the statement with cameras, with flashes. That photo came out in all the newspapers in the valley, Alexander. That face is yours, not mine." He approached. "If this is opened, it is not opened for me. It is opened for you." And there, for the first time, Alexander understood the complete design of the trap in which he had lived during all those years, without knowing it. "And one more thing," added Ishmael, pointing to the folder that Alexander pressed against his chest. "That which you bring there is already signed by you, with reading and everything. The eviction of Selden Valley goes out the same, with your blessing or without it." He sat down again. "Go bathe. Sleep. Tomorrow it will pass." The file was in the basement. Alexander went down alone with the master key that he had not used for years. He turned on the lights. Rows and rows of shelves, cardboard boxes, dust. He found the section. He found the year. He found the box. He opened it with his heart pounding in his throat. Empty? Not empty. Inside, there was only one sheet, a withdrawal slip, an internal form of those that no one looks at, where it was noted who had taken a file and when. Alexander lifted it with trembling fingers. The viewpoint file had been withdrawn from the archive. Someone had taken it away a very long time ago, and in the signature line, with handwriting that he knew better than his own, the handwriting of the market lists, the one on the notes on the refrigerator door, the one on the birthday cards that he still kept in a drawer, there was a name: Valerie Foster, his wife. Alexander held onto the shelf so as not to fall. Valerie had taken that file. Valerie knew. Valerie was investigating what her own company had done. And days later, Valerie was no longer there. His legs buckled. He sat on the archive floor with the slip in his hand, while everything he thought he knew about the worst pain of his life turned inside out, like a glove. "Dad?" Alexander raised his head. Renee was standing in the door of the archive looking at him from above with her arms crossed. "Renee, what are you doing here?" And his daughter, that daughter with whom he had spent years exchanging phrases of courtesy, said with a perfectly serene voice, "Waiting for you to come down." "What?" "I have spent years waiting for you to come down to this basement." And then she took something out of her bag and showed it to him. "Because Mom told me that one day you would do it, and made me promise that until that day I would keep this. It was an old, worn folder, and on the cover, written with a marker, it said, "Viewpoint Original." Alexander looked at the folder in his daughter's hands and was not capable of stretching out his arm. "You had this?" he whispered. "Always, always, since Mom gave it to me." Renee walked down the stairs of the archive slowly, without hurry, with a serenity that hurt him more than a scream. She told me, "Keep it and don't give it to him until he comes down alone to look for it." "Why?" Alexander stood up with difficulty. "Why that condition? I could have fixed it years ago." "No," Renee shook her head. "That was precisely the point, Dad. If I gave it to you, you would resolve it like you resolve everything. Calling someone, paying something, delegating. Mom didn't want you to resolve it. She looked at him. She wanted you to understand it. And to understand it, you had to come down with your own feet to look for the box, even if it took your whole life." Alexander felt his eyes filling. She trusted that I was going to come down? She was the only one. And that blow, said without cruelty, with a clean sadness, broke him in the middle. "Renee, do you know how many times I passed by this door?" His daughter looked at the shelves, the dust, the boxes. "All these years I passed and looked down and said to myself, 'Not today either.' And every time you appeared in a magazine, in an interview talking about the company that was building the country's future, I thought about this box." Her voice broke slightly, just barely. "I didn't hate you, Dad. That would have been easier. I felt pity for you." Alexander leaned on the shelf. "Your mom, she knew everything. She discovered everything." Renee put the folder on a box between them like someone leaving a weapon on the table. At the beginning, she wasn't looking for anything. She was organizing papers of a foundation, and she found an inconsistency, and she pulled that thread, and the thread led her to the viewpoint. And why didn't she tell me? She told you. Alexander looked at her without understanding. "She told you 3 times, Dad." Renee crossed her arms. "I was there. I was old enough to remember. She entered your studio and told you there was something serious with the work in the valley. And you, without raising your eyes, answered her that Ishmael took care of that. The second time she told you there was a man detained who had nothing to do with it, and you told her not to get involved, that she didn't understand business." She made a long pause. "The third time she didn't say anything to you anymore. She came down to this archive and took the box out, she herself." Alexander put his hands to his face. "I don't remember," he groaned. "I don't remember any of that." "Of course you don't." And for the first time, Renee's voice trembled for real. "That is exactly the problem. People like you don't remember the things that ruin other people's lives, because, for you, they were just any Tuesday." The silence of the basement became unbearable. Afterward, she got sick. Renee continued lower, and everything else stopped mattering. And in the last time, when she could barely speak anymore, she made me promise 2 things. One was the folder. Her eyes flooded. The other was that I wouldn't stop loving you, and that promise, Dad, cost me much more than the first. Alexander approached his daughter, and that young woman who had spent years holding herself up alone collapsed on his chest. "Forgive me," he said against her head. "Forgive me, my love." "Don't ask me for forgiveness." Renee pulled away, wiped her face with the back of her hand, and pointed to the folder. "Ask it of the people who are inside that." Alexander opened it right there, sitting on the archive floor with his daughter by his side, and his hand trembled as he saw the first sheet. It was the report, the original written by hand on a grid paper with that large, clumsy handwriting that he already knew. The measurements, the sketches made with a ruler, the 3 warnings underlined with so much force that the stroke had gone through the sheet, and stapled in the corner, a photocopy of the stamped, dated receipt. Alexander passed his finger over the mark of the seal and felt his heart stop. "With this, everything falls," he murmured. "No," Renee denied. "Dad, listen to me. That is a photocopy. The original of the receipt never appeared. A lawyer is going to say that that seal was forged, that you wrote that report the day before yesterday, that everything is a montage by a man who went crazy in a lost village. Then this is useless. It is useful if the person who stamped it appears." Renee took another sheet from the folder. Mom knew, so the last thing she noted was a name. Alexander took the paper. A single line with Valerie's handwriting, the one who received the report. Celeste Almeida, reception. And below, another smaller, tighter line, evidently written later, resigned a few days later. No one knows where she is. Find her. Alexander closed his eyes. "I am going to find her, Dad. I am going to find her." And then the phone rang. He looked at the screen. A number from the valley. "Yes, Don Alexander?" Doña Amparo's voice came interrupted with the wind hitting the microphone. "My son, can you hear me?" We had to take the boy down. Alexander stood up with a jump. "What happened?" "He drowned last night. He drowned. The air wasn't getting into him." The old woman was crying and trying not to let it be noticed. We brought him in the baker's truck, bumping along the road, and I was going behind holding him. We are at Santa Rosalia Clinic. Marisol isn't talking, isn't eating, isn't moving from the door. A pause. "My son, if you are going to do something, do it now." The Santa Rosalia Clinic smelled of disinfectant and waiting. Alexander crossed the hallway almost running and stopped short. Marisol was sitting in a chair alone with her hands clasped and her gaze fixed on a closed door. She wasn't crying. She wasn't moving. She had the exact immobility of someone who has spent hours praying without words. Upon seeing him, she wasn't surprised. Nothing surprised her anymore. "He is inside," she said. Alexander sat by her side and didn't say anything stupid. He didn't say, "He is going to be fine." He didn't say, "Calm down." He sat and stayed, and that was the first time in his life that he accompanied someone without offering them a solution. "It happened a long time ago. It is called asthma," she said suddenly. "He started when he was little, and with the humidity of the house, it gets worse." "Marisol. The doctor at the clinic explained it to me years ago." Her voice was flat, without any emotion, which is how people who have already cried everything talk. "He told me that with the correct treatment, with the correct medications, my son would have a normal life. Run, play, everything. And why didn't you—" He stopped before finishing the question. Marisol turned her head and looked at him for the first time. "Because it costs money, sir." Alexander felt his chest emptying. "All these years I saved every coin," she said. "Every coin. I didn't buy anything. I didn't even buy myself a pair of shoes. The people in the valley think I am stingy. Do you know? They say it. They think I hoard for greed." Her jaw tightened. "And I let them believe it. Why were you saving?" And then Marisol said the phrase that was going to haunt Alexander Foster until the last day of his life. "For Arthur's lawyer." Alexander stopped breathing. "Every year a new lawyer," she continued, looking at the door again. Every year I save, 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 and when I finally have some, I go up to the city and pay someone to review the case, and they all tell me the same thing. Ma'am, without the receipt, there is nothing to be done, and they keep my money. And I go down to the valley and start saving again. She swallowed, and like that, one time and another, and another. Marisol. Alexander's voice broke. That money was your son's treatment. Yes. A single word, without defense, without excuse. Every day I chose, she said, and finally her face fell apart. Every day of my life, sir. Every coin I put in that jar was a coin that didn't go to Thomas's medicine. And every time he coughed at night, I heard that cough in the darkness and thought, today, too, I chose the Father. Today, too. She bent over herself with her hands on her face. What kind of mother does that? Sobbing. Tell me yourself. What kind of mother takes the air from her son to pay a lawyer for a man who might not come back ever? Alexander knelt on the clinic floor in front of her, not caring who saw him. One who was trying to return his father to him, he said. One who was fighting for both things at the same time because no one helped her do it. He took her hands. Don't ever dare to say that you weren't a good mother. That boy has spent his whole life pretending to believe in heaven so as not to hurt you. Where do you think he learned to love like that, Marisol? Where? She looked at him with ruined eyes, and for the first time, she didn't look at him like the man in the portrait. She looked at him like a person. I am going to pay for the treatment, he said. No, Marisol. It is not pride, she said, shaking her head forcefully. I don't have pride left, sir. It finished a long time ago. It is something else. She squeezed his hands. If you pay, I have to stop saving. And if I stop saving, it is because I accepted that Arthur isn't coming back. And I cannot accept that. Not yet. Alexander understood, and the understanding was worse than any blow. That woman preferred for her son to continue without medicine rather than to sign in her own heart the act of surrender. Then both things, he said. What? The treatment and the man. He stood up. Both. I am not asking you to choose. You will never have to choose again. The door opened. The doctor came out, tired, wiping his hands. He is stable, he said. We opened his airway. He responded well. But ma'am, listen to me. This cannot happen again. The next time, that dirt road is too long. Marisol nodded, unable to speak. He can pass. He is awake, and asks for you. The doctor hesitated. And he asks for a gentleman. He says there is a gentleman who promised him something. Alexander felt his eyes burning. They entered. Thomas was tiny in that enormous bed, with a mask on his face and his chest rising and falling, still with effort. Upon seeing them, he barely raised his hand. Mom, said the boy with a thread of a voice, don't cry. I am not crying, my love. Yes, you are. And Thomas, with a weakness that it hurt to watch, turned his head and searched for Alexander with his eyes. Don Alexander. Here I am, champion. Did you find it? He whispered. Did you find my father's paper? Alexander approached the bed and took the report folded with the seal from his pocket. I found it. The boy's eyes opened wide. Then, he is going to come back? And Alexander, who had lied his entire professional life, who had made up balances and softened statements and learned to say what was convenient, looked at that boy and wasn't able to lie. I am going to do everything a man can do, he said. Everything. And if it isn't enough, I am going to do more." Thomas smiled under the mask. "That is fine," he murmured. "I believe you." And those 3 words, "I believe you," said by the only human being in the world who had the right to never believe him, finished destroying Alexander Foster. He went out to the hallway so they wouldn't see him, and in the hallway, the phone rang. It was Renee, and she was screaming, "Dad! Dad! Listen to me!" Ishmael moved everything forward. "What?" "He signed the order this morning. The machines already left. They are going up the dirt road right now, Dad, today." Alexander looked back toward the room where a boy had just told him he believed him, toward the valley where that boy had a house that in a few hours would cease to exist. The machines were already on the dirt road. Alexander saw them from the curve, 3 yellow masses climbing slowly in a line, raising dust with the quiet slowness of things that are in no hurry because they know they are going to arrive anyway. He stopped the rental truck across the middle of the road, jumped out, and walked toward them, and stood there in the middle with his arms open. The first machine stopped a few meters away. The operator leaned out, annoyed. "Sir, get out of the way. We have an order." "I am the owner of the company that signed that order," shouted Alexander, "and I am telling you to turn off that engine." The man looked him from head to toe. The ruined clothes, the beard of days, the shoes that were no longer shoes. "Yes, sure," he said, "and I am the governor. Turn it off. Sir, get out of the way, or I will take you out." And then, behind Alexander, the first step was heard. Doña Amparo went out to the road leaning on her cane, with that slowness of people who no longer run for anything. She advanced and stood next to him. After that came Father Ephraim. After that, a woman with a child in her arms. After that, 2 men. After that, a boy with a shovel. After that, an entire family, one after another. Without screaming, without insulting, without lifting a stone, the inhabitants of Selden Valley were leaving their houses and forming a silent line across the width of the dirt road. 73 families. The operator turned off the engine. The silence that fell over the valley was so great that the wind could be heard. "Who are you?" asked someone from the line. Alexander turned around and looked at those people and understood that the moment he had been avoiding for days had arrived. "My name is Alexander Foster." The name fell on the village like a stone in a well. He saw the recognition pass from face to face in a chain like fire in dry grass. He saw the woman with the child take a step back. He saw the boy with the shovel clench the handle. He saw the face of the baker, the same man who the night before had driven bumpily along that road with Thomas drowning in the back seat, decompose completely. "You," said someone. "Yes, you are the one from the newspaper. Yes, you are the one who—" The man's voice broke. "We gave you water." And there was the phrase. Alexander closed his eyes and received it as one receives a deserved blow. "Yes," he said, "you gave me water." No one shouted at him, no one pushed him. It was worse. The entire line, without agreeing, took a step back, all at the same time, as if he were something that should not be touched. All except Doña Amparo. The old woman stayed exactly where she was, at his side, with her cane buried in the earth. "Doña Amparo," murmured Father Ephraim, "come here." "No, Ephraim." "I looked at him in the face when he arrived," said the old woman, and her voice reached the last corner of the road. "And I am going to tell this village what I saw. I saw a man with thirst. She hit the ground with the cane. You also saw it. That is why now it burns you, because you gave water to a human being. And now it turns out the human being had a surname." No one answered. "And I ask you one thing," she continued. "Would you have given him the water if you had known?" The silence became unbearable. "Think about it well before answering," said Doña Amparo, "because the answer to that question is the entire class of people we are." The automobile arrived an hour later. Ishmael Vidal stepped down, impeccable, alien to the dust, with a folder under his arm and that smile that Alexander had confused for years with loyalty. "What a scene," he said, looking at the line of people. "Very moving." "It is over, Ishmael." "Oh, yes?" Ishmael opened his folder. "Because I have here an order signed, stamped, and notified, and I have here your signature, brother." Again he took out the sheet and showed it to him. "See? You already did it before. You already did it yesterday. And you are going to do it again because it is the only thing you know how to do." Alexander looked at the paper, and then looked at the people. He looked at Doña Amparo, who had given him bread when he had no way to pay for it, at Father Ephraim, who had kept an envelope for years, waiting for someone who was not going to come, at the baker, who had taken a drowning boy down that impossible road without charging him anything. And he thought about a bucket of water with earth that was still the best thing he had ever drunk in his life. "You are right," he said. "I did it before." And he snatched the sheet from his hands. Alexander tore it. Once, twice, 4 times, and let the wind of the valley carry the pieces along the dirt road. Ishmael laughed, incredulous. "And what does that resolve? There are copies, there is a record. That is nothing. It is theater for peasants." "I know it doesn't resolve anything," said Alexander, "but these people needed to see someone tear it." He took a step toward him, and I needed to know if I could. Ishmael's smile faded for the first time. "You are committing a very expensive error. I am going to open the Viewpoint case. You are not going to do it. I am going to deliver the report, the letter, and everything I found. You are not going to do it." And finally Ishmael lost his calm because the one who gets burned is you. Your face, your signature, your surname. Renee goes out to the street with that surname, Alexander, and your company, and the 300 employees. You are going to destroy everything we built for a foreman. Alexander looked at him for a long time. "His name is Arthur Quintero," he said, "and in all these years you never called him by his name, not even once." He turned around and walked toward his truck. "You are going to lose everything," shouted Ishmael behind his back. Alexander did not stop. "I already lost everything," he said. "A long time ago. It is just that I am only now finding out." Renee waited for him in the town below with the phone in her hand and red eyes. "Dad, listen to me well. I spoke with 3 lawyers. If you deliver this, there is no way you will come out clean. Your name is in the statement. The face in the photos is yours. Ishmael is going to defend himself, saying that he only followed orders, and he will be right on paper." She grabbed his arm. "You are going to lose the company. You are going to lose the house. You are going to lose the surname." "Yes, Dad." "Renee." Alexander took her face with both hands. "Arthur Quintero lost everything for a paper that he wrote with his own hand to save people. I am going to lose everything for a paper that I signed without looking." He wiped away a tear with his thumb. "It is the fairest account I have seen in my life." Renee hugged him with a strength he hadn't felt in years. "Mom was right," she whispered against his shoulder. "About what?" "About the second promise." She pulled away with a wet face and the first real smile. "She made me promise that I wouldn't stop loving you, and I told her that it was an impossible promise. She shook her head, and she told me, "Wait, one day he is going to come down alone, and that day you will recognize him." Alexander had to lean on the hood. His wife, that woman who was already sick when she went down to the archive, who knew perfectly well how much time she had left, and who used the last thing she had, not to say goodbye to the world, but to fight for a family of strangers she would never meet, had foreseen this day. She had waited for him from the other side. "I found Celeste Almeida," said Renee. Alexander raised his head suddenly. "Where?" "She never went very far. She lives in an old building 30 minutes from our house." Renee swallowed. "Dad." The woman started to tremble when she heard our surname. Tremble, for real. Celeste Almeida opened the door, just a crack. "I have nothing to say." "Ma'am?" "Please, I already resigned. I already left. I already did everything they asked me." Her voice was trembling. "Go away." "A man is locked up," said Alexander. The crack did not close. It did not open either. "I know it," she whispered. "You think I don't know it?" "Ma'am, every day I know it." And there the door opened all the way, and a woman appeared who had gone years without sleeping well. Every day of my life I received that report. I put the seal on it. I gave the receipt in his hand. And that man said to me, "Thank you, miss." And he left calm because he believed it had served for something. She put her hands to her mouth. And a few days later, your partner came and explained to me very kindly that that paper had never existed, and that I had never existed, and that if I said a word, I was not going to work anywhere ever again. "And you? What did you do?" asked Renee quietly. "I had a sick mother and rent," she said. "That is what I did. I signed the resignation, grabbed the envelope they gave me, and shut my mouth." Her face collapsed. "And I have spent all these years waiting for someone to knock on this door. Do you know what that is? Waiting for the punishment like someone waiting for a glass of water." Alexander felt his throat closing. "Mrs. Almeida, I am not coming to punish you. I signed the statement that sent him to jail. You and I are in exactly the same place." He extended his hand. "And there is only one way to get off that." Celeste looked at him, then turned around and disappeared inside the apartment. She returned with a shoebox. She opened it with trembling fingers. She pushed aside photos, she pushed aside old receipts, and from the bottom, she took out a folded sheet protected with a plastic cover, cared for like a relic. The original receipt with the seal, with the date, with his signature of reception. "I never threw it away," she said, crying. "I carried it in my purse the day I resigned, and I didn't know why." She put it in his hands. "Now I know why." The hallway was long and smelled of cold stone. Alexander walked to a small room with a table and a glass, and he sat on the side that belonged to him and waited. When the man entered and sat on the other side, Alexander could not speak for almost a full minute. Arthur Quintero had Thomas's hands, the same large, worn ones with marked knuckles. "You are the one from the newspaper," said the man. "Yes. You arrived late." "Yes." Arthur nodded slowly, without anger. And that absence of anger was the most difficult thing to bear. "My son is okay?" And that was his first question. Not, "Get me out of here." Not, "You ruined me." "He is in a clinic," said Alexander. "He had a crisis. He is stable." He put his hands on the table. "Arthur, listen to me. I have your report, the original, and I have the stamped receipt. Celeste Almeida kept it all these years, and she is going to testify." The man remained motionless. "I am going to turn everything in," continued Alexander, with his voice trembling. I am going to testify against my own company, against my partner, against me. He approached the glass. It is over. Can you hear me? You are going to your house. You are going to see Thomas. You are going to see Marisol. It is over. And then Arthur Quintero did something that Alexander had not foreseen in any of his calculations. He lowered his head and cried. But he did not cry from joy. "It is useless," he said. "What? What is useless, sir?" He raised his ruined face. "Keep your papers. Arthur, I have the proof." "I signed," shouted the man. The sound bounced off the walls. Alexander stood frozen. "What did you say?" "I signed," repeated Arthur with a destroyed voice. "I confessed, sir, with my name and my own hand. No one forced me by force. I sat at a table like this and signed a paper saying that it was my fault. But why?" Alexander felt his chest splitting. "You warned. You had the receipt. Why did you sign?" And Arthur Quintero, the man who had spent his entire life paying for something he did not do, looked at the man who had condemned him and said, "Because your partner came to see me." He put his open hand on the glass, and he brought me a photo of my wife leaving the hospital with my newborn son in her arms, and he told me that if I did not sign, they were going to go for her. "When?" asked Alexander. Arthur raised his eyes without understanding. "When did he come to see you?" Alexander stuck himself to the glass. "Your partner, Ishmael Vidal. When did he enter here?" "Before I signed. A few days before." "And how did he enter?" Arthur blinked. "How does everyone enter, sir?" "Through the door." He gave his name, showed his document. And Alexander Foster felt for the first time in his life that the air entered his lungs completely. "Arthur," his hands were trembling on the table. "Listen to me well. Every person who crosses that door is noted down with name, with document, with the time in a book. There is a record of all those who came to see you." The man looked at him without understanding. "And what does that change?" "Everything," said Alexander. "That the lawyer of the company who accused you came to see you alone days before you declared yourself guilty, without defense present, and without any legal reason to be here." He passed his hand over his face. "Arthur, that visit should not have existed, and it was written. He signed it with his own hand." Arthur stayed very still. "They were never going to look at it," he said softly. "That book has been there forever. No one ever opened it because no one had motives to open it." Alexander stood up. "Now you have them." And the man on the other side of the glass, the one who had carried the most unjust weight Alexander knew, asked a question that sounded like a child's. "Do you think they are going to believe me?" "Alone." "No," said Alexander. "They are going to believe you, plus the report, plus the stamped receipt, plus Celeste Almeida testifying, plus that visitor book." He supported his open palm against the glass in front of his. "And plus a rich man saying in front of the whole country that he was the one who signed." Arthur looked at him for a long time. "That is going to destroy you." "Yes. And why would you do it?" Alexander thought about a dirt road, about 3 vehicles that drove past, about a woman on her knees scrubbing a floor where others walked. "Because your wife gave me water," he said, knowing who I was. The conference was in the lobby of the Crystal Tower with the cameras turned on and the microphones stacked on the table. Alexander entered without lawyers. René squeezed his hand before letting him go. He spoke for 23 minutes. He told about the viewpoint, told about the buried report, told about his signature on the statement that had pointed to one single man. He did not say, "I was deceived." He did not say, I didn't know. He did not use even once that comfortable word he had used his entire life. I delegated, he said. I signed without reading. And to sign without reading when one has the power that I had is not an oversight. It is a decision. I chose not to know. And that choice cost a man his entire life, a woman the future she was going to have, and a boy the father he was owed. A journalist raised his hand. Mr. Foster, do you understand that with this statement you are incriminating yourself? Yes. And why do you do it? Alexander took out of his pocket a yellow sheet folded so many times that the creases were fabric. Because a man wrote me this letter a very long time ago, he said. I never received it because my company took care that it wouldn't arrive. In this letter, he does not ask me to get him out of jail. He does not ask me for money. He does not ask me for forgiveness. He raised his gaze. He asks me for only one thing, and I am going to read it, because it is the only important thing that is going to be said today in this room. The entire lobby remained in silence, and with his voice breaking in the middle, Alexander read, I ask you for only one thing. When my son grows up and asks who his father was, let someone tell him that his father was not a bad man, that his father warned, that his father shouted, and no one heard him. He lowered the paper and looked directly at the center camera. Thomas, he said, I know you are watching. Listen to me well, because your father waited your whole life for someone to tell you. His eyes filled. Your father did nothing wrong. Your father warned. He wrote it with his hand. He handed it in the city. And he fought for people he didn't even know. And when they threatened him, he did not surrender. He chose to carry it all himself to protect your mom and to protect you. His voice was cut. Your father is the most decent man who has stepped into that company. And the worst of all, son, the worst of all, was the one who is talking to you now. In a room at the Santa Rosalia Clinic, a boy with a mask on his face watched an old television hanging on the wall and stretched out his hand and looked for his mother's without stopping looking at the screen. Marisol took his hand and didn't say anything because there was nothing to say. She had spent a lifetime waiting for someone to pronounce those words, and she never imagined that that mouth would say them. What came after was fast, and it was not clean. The case was reopened, the visitor book appeared, and there it was written with Ishmael Vidal's elegant handwriting. The signature he had put down, calm, sure, because he never thought someone would look for it. Celeste Almeida testified for 3 hours, trembling with the shoebox on the table. When she came out, she breathed deeply on the sidewalk like someone coming out of the water. Ishmael denied everything. Afterward, he denied. Afterward, he hired the best lawyers in the country and stopped talking. His process followed its slow and public course, and Alexander fulfilled his part. He lost the company. The board removed him in a meeting that lasted 11 minutes. He lost the accounts. He lost the city house. He lost the surname that for decades had opened all the doors. The same ones who called him to dinner stopped answering his phone. A channel called him the millionaire who destroyed himself. He signed everything they put in front of him, this time reading every line. "Doesn't it scare you?" Renee asked him one night while they were emptying the studio. Alexander looked at the boxes. "All my life I was afraid of losing this," he said. "And it turns out the only thing I really lost, I lost a long time ago. And it was for not reading a sheet." He closed a box. "This is just moving, my love." The day the door opened, there was fog on the road. Arthur Quintero came out with a fabric bag in his hand and stopped without knowing where to walk. He had spent so much time walking alone to where they indicated that the open space made him dizzy. And then he heard the shout, "Dad!" Thomas crossed the esplanade running for real, with all the air in his lungs, without coughing, without stopping, without bending. Arthur dropped the bag and fell to his knees just in time to receive him. And that man, who had not cried in front of anyone in all those years, fell apart, hugging his son on the ground, touching his face, his head, his shoulders, as if he needed to prove with his hands that it was true. "You are big," he was sobbing. "You are big, my son. You are so big." "I knew you weren't in heaven," cried Thomas against his neck. "I always knew. I cleaned the stone for you anyway, Dad. Every week I cleaned the stone for you." And Marisol approached slowly, trembling completely, and stood in front of her husband without being able to say a word. Arthur stood up, looked at her. "Forgive me," he said. And Marisol, who had saved coin by coin during a whole life, who had cleaned others' floors, who had lied and sustained and held on without breaking in front of anyone, her whole body broke. "I didn't stop saving," was all she could say. "Arthur, I never stopped saving." He hugged her, and there in that esplanade with fog, that family returned to exist. Alexander watched them from afar, leaning on a borrowed truck. He didn't approach. He understood perfectly that that moment did not belong to him. But Thomas saw him and let go of his father and ran toward him and hugged him by the waist with all the strength he had. "I believed you," said the boy. Alexander could not answer. He put his hand on his head and nodded. In the valley, things changed without noise, like things that last. The eviction of Selden Valley was never executed. The order fell when it came to light how the papers had been obtained, and the 73 families finally received the titles they had been waiting for generations. The baker framed his and hung it next to the oven. The little school, the Almonds, opened a new classroom, and Marisol Quintero returned to the notebooks she had kept in a box under the bed, those she had never had the heart to throw away. She studied at night with Arthur holding the candle for her when the light cut out, and Thomas asleep in the chair next to them. With time, she started to give classes, and in that valley, the woman whom no one had wanted to hire for anything other than a bucket and a rag came to be the person who taught everyone's children to read. The first time a father said to her, "Good morning, teacher," she had to go into the classroom so they wouldn't see her crying. Thomas received his treatment. Asthma is one of those things that doesn't go away, but it stopped being a conviction. He ran, played, fell from a tree, and broke his arm, and Marisol celebrated that cast as if it were a diploma, because it was the first time her son was hurt doing something children do. And one afternoon, Arthur went to the Field of Saints with a wheelbarrow. He lifted the cement headstone where his own name was engraved by finger, loaded it by himself, and took it down the path to the little school. There they buried it upside down, with the name facing down, and used it as a step at the entrance of the new classroom so that it serves for something, he said. And even today, the children of Selden Valley enter to learn by stepping on the stone that said their teacher was a widow. Alexander stayed. No one asked him to, and no one thanked him. At the beginning, he rented a room at the Cherry Inn, and he got up early. He learned to fix the roof. He learned to carry milk cans. He learned bumpily to be no one with the last thing that remained after everything was liquidated. And with what Renee put from her part, without telling anyone, they fixed the dirt road. It was the only thing he asked for, the road. "Did you choose the road?" Doña Amparo asked him, with everything there was to do? You chose the road? Alexander looked at the climb, the curves, the ruts. A boy almost didn't make it to the hospital on this road, he said. Never again. The old woman nodded slowly. Now you understood, she said, and she left with her cane. Doña Amparo got to see the finished road. She sat one afternoon in her wicker chair in the hallway of the Tin Pots, and left, calm, as those leave who did what they had to do. Father Ephraim gave the Mass, and the entire valley went walking. Renee went up every once in a while, at the beginning for her father, afterward for the valley. She graduated, and in the act, when they asked to whom she dedicated the title, she said two names, that of her mother and that of a teacher from a mountain village. Years passed, and one hot afternoon, a city automobile got stuck in the curve of the road. A man in a suit got out with the phone held high, looking for a signal where there was none, looking at the engine like someone looking at a language he doesn't speak. Alexander saw him from the inn's patio. He already had white hair and worn hands, and a very long time had passed since anyone had called him Sir. And he saw Thomas pass, Thomas Quintero, now a tall young man with a bucket in his hand, on his way to his house. The young man saw the man in the suit, stopped, and Alexander from the patio held his breath, because he knew exactly what was about to occur, and because in that fraction of a second, the entire history was contained. Thomas did not ask who he was. He did not ask where he came from, nor what surname he had, nor what he had done in his life. He crossed the road and offered him the bucket. The man hesitated. He looked at the water that wasn't clean, that had earth spinning inside. "Drink it," said Thomas. "Here the sun hits hard." And the man drank. Alexander leaned on the patio post and lowered his head and let the tears run without wiping them, because there it was, after everything, after the lawyers, the newspapers, the cameras, the crystal tower, and the ruin. There it was, the only thing that had always mattered. A young man who did not ask. Marisol went out to the hallway with the notebooks under her arm and stood by his side to watch. "You taught him that," said Alexander. "No," she shook her head and smiled. "His father taught him that. I only didn't let him forget it." And on the dirt road, that road where a powerful man had discovered that his fortune was not worth a glass of water, and where a woman who had everything to hate him for chose not to teach her son to pass by, two generations of the same family continued doing the only thing they never learned not to do: stop. Because you don't ask the person who has thirst for their name. You give them the water. Life is often defined by the choices we make when we are stripped of our masks and our titles. For years, Alexander lived in a bubble of convenience, believing that his signature on a document was merely an administrative task rather than an act that could alter the trajectory of human lives. His journey to Selden Valley was not just a physical displacement, it was a profound spiritual reawakening. When we reach a certain age, we realize that the legacy we leave behind is not measured by the empires we build or the capital we accumulate, but by the small, often invisible acts of humanity we choose to extend to others, especially those we have wronged. It is easy to be kind when we are at the top of the world, but true nobility is found in the willingness to stop, to look someone in the eye, and to offer a cup of water when the world has offered them only dust. We are all, at our core, interconnected, and the stories of Marisol and Arthur serve as a poignant reminder that even the most broken life can be reconstructed through the persistence of love, the courage of truth, and the simple, radical act of forgiveness.